Hello, my name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times, coming to you again from the controversial location of the quote-unquote tiny home village in New Westminster with an update. I've got some news. What sparked my interest in this update is that the mayor of New Westminster, Patrick Johnstone, was interviewed on CTV News, and he took some swipes at groups that are opposing this project.
Spreading the same disinformation about a project here as they did in 3 or 4 other cities on completely different projects. That's not helpful to us understanding our community's concerns and addressing them. It's just white noise that confuses the conversation.
Saying that they were spreading disinformation and white noise, and he further followed that up with a blog post on his blog. He says, but before I get into that, just to remind everyone, behind me here are a series of containers. Each container, being 40 feet long, is going to have 3 separate dwelling units inside it. And these, they're calling it a tiny home village, and they'll be in a circle, and there'll be up to 30 people living at this location. And one of the reasons this is very controversial is because it's so near the rail right-of-way, as well as the industry, and the residents nearby here are also extremely upset about this project. So there's been a lot of back and forth in the media and information sessions. So Johnstone, last week, he said, I want to talk about the difference between community engagement and the, quote, white noise of this AstroTurf anti-housing group. Now, there's a group called Let's Vote, and there's another one called We Vote Canada. Now, this group has been successful in pushing back on other housing projects in the metro region, in Burnaby in particular. So, in this blog post, Johnstone said a few other things that seem to indicate that perhaps the project is not as solidly moving forward as had previously been thought. He says, the tiny homes village is a work in progress. As a city, we have engaged with the railways and industrial neighbors and are connecting them with BC Housing to determine what measures can be put into the operations plan to manage existing security and safety issues. So, as you can tell, there's a lot of noise here. We're right steps away from the SRY rail link rail yard. It's a huge rail yard, and there's constant rail traffic going by here just steps away, which is obviously why the railway companies have expressed concern. So my question, this prompted me to send to the city and to BC Housing a series of questions to ask about the status of the project. These questions were, has the project been paused per the Railway Association of Canada letter that was sent around? Did the city's railway technical committee weigh in and did it pass muster with them? What about what exactly are the safety considerations mentioned by Mayor Johnstone in his blog post? What are the specifics? And also, what about the liability concerns? The Railway Association of Canada said, well, there's obviously a liability issue at stake here. If someone wanders who may be under the influence, because this is the biggest controversy going, is that it's a low barrier facility where drug use, including hard drugs, is going to be permitted. So if someone ends up getting injured or killed, by a train, well, who's responsible? So I asked all these questions. I also put some questions to BC Housing. I said, has the lease been signed for this property? Who's paying for it? Because in the original February 23 meeting that BC Housing presented at New Westminster Council, they said that the city would be paying 1/4 of the lease cost. So I said, well, is that still the case? So I put all these questions to the city and to BC Housing, and I was pleased to get responses to my questions, and I'll just report them to you, what I heard from the city of New Westminster. The biggest question was, is it just going ahead? Because the concern from the railways was, well, we were supposed to be consulted in advance, and they do a review, and then they say, well, this passes muster or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then the project does not proceed. Well, it's evident that the project is proceeding with or without any approved plan. So Brittany Dack, the supervisor of implementation for the Crisis Response Pilot Project, City of New Westminster, says the current project timeline and details still stand. So now I further asked about, well, what about the requirement to develop a safety plan or review the project with respect to the proximity guidelines? Well, she says, well, specifically related to well, basically she's saying that that's the responsibility of BC Housing, and specifically related to resident safety adjacency rail industry is being formulated by BC Housing. It's being formulated. So when it's going to be formulated, well, I'll get to that in a minute. I have an answer here from BC Housing. So she says that and it's much appreciate getting these answers from the city. She said the city's Railway Technical Committee, which has in its terms of reference reviewing projects such as this, residential projects, in advance. Apparently they had a meeting on March 10th, but there weren't enough rail stakeholders at the meeting to discuss it. So it didn't get kind of rustled through. So they're going to meet on June 9th. So it's another case of, well, things are kind of happening, but the rail issues have not been really addressed. So it's a case of, there's a plan to make a plan. That's where it stands. So I got this response from BC Housing at 4 o'clock today. If this goes, you're seeing this tomorrow, it's, what I'm saying is that I've just received this, hours ago. So this is a response to my questions from BC Housing, specifically about the railway issues. And he says, the statement is as follows: the project will be in place temporarily as we continue to build more permanent supportive homes in the community. The lease for the land was finalized in March 2026. So they're on the hook for it, no matter what. So they've signed on the dotted line for this land, about 2 acres. It's not been disclosed how much they're paying for it. And as to the question of who's paying for it, it says BC Housing and the City of New Westminster are working on finalizing funding contributions to this project. Pretty open-ended. So it sounds like BC Housing and the City of New Westminster have not even yet kind of come to the point where they're decided who's going to pay for what. So the City of New Westminster could be on the hook for a lot more than they have already disclosed. We don't exactly know. Now on the railway considerations, railway safety is critical. And it says the operator of this project will develop a railway safety plan in consultation with BC Housing, the City of New Westminster, and rail operators. This plan will be in place before the building opens. So the building is expected to open before December of this year. So there's some key information in this disclosure, and that is that BC Housing doesn't operate its properties. It hires third parties to operate the buildings. So the hiring of the operator has not actually been completed yet. It's not known who the operator will be. So BC Housing has downloaded the responsibility to develop a rail safety plan to the operator. That's kind of a big piece of news in this big story here, is that what the residents and the rail operators have kind of concluded is that this is happening whether the rail companies like it or not. It is just barreling ahead. There's no opportunity to say, hey, oh, well, we never thought of that. Geez, you're right about that safety concern. Let's do a rethink. There's no rethink happening here. Okay, so that's the state of the communications. Now, I'd like to further talk about this project in the context that I think is common to the entire province of British Columbia. This news isn't just about New Westminster. This is kind of a story that's replicated across the entire province. It's a metaphor, if you will, for what's happening in BC in relation to the interrelated problems of homelessness, drug addiction, and mental illness and crime. And let's throw disorder in there. So, across this province, people are increasingly pushing back on the concept of harm reduction and safe supply and decriminalization of hard drugs. And the approach of the province of BC is very much in the focus of criticism. So this example of a project that's kind of, it seems that they're flying by the seat of their pants, trying to make something happen here. So what's happened now in this community, imagine happens in communities across BC. You have different camps. You have one camp saying, oh, well, you're anti-housing and you're spreading disinformation. Yeah, oh no, you hate people. And well, whereas the government is saying, well, you have a housing need, you have homeless people, you have people who need housing, and we're just delivering the housing that's needed. Well, who's right? So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about how this project came to be and what could be described as misinformation that has come from BC Housing and the City of New Westminster, whereas they're pointing the finger at everyone else and saying it's misinformation. You're spreading misinformation about this project. I would contend, based on the facts, that it's the other way around. And the first clue here about this is that you have to understand, what is the tiny home village all about? So according to the presentation that was brought by Naomi Brunemeyer on February 23rd, 2026, to the City of New Westminster, she described what is called their hearth, the heart and hearth. So heart and hearth, what is the This is an acronym. So the H stands for homeless. The E stands for encampment. So this project, this solution here, these containers were developed to address homeless encampments. It's very specifically targeted towards dealing with encampments. Here's the problem. There's no encampment here. This is a solution looking for a problem. So it's very unfortunate because the way in which BC Housing positioned this and the way the city positioned this project was, well, there's been so much positive feedback about these heart and hearth solutions across BC. Here's a slide from their presentation to City Council. So it has all of these different cities and towns, Abbotsford, Duncan, Nanaimo, Prince George, and it says 17 encampment response plans in progress or completed since 2024. Long-standing encampments, Kelowna, Prince George. Rapid response to higher risk encampments, Abbotsford. So the way the story was spun out to the residents of New Westminster is that, well, Johnstone said he got onto the phone to talk to the mayors of some of these towns where they had these tiny homes. He says, well, they're great. They've worked out great. Well, here's the problem with that assessment. What is described is sort of a before and after. If you have a sprawling homeless encampment, a dystopian hellscape of potential fires, crime, open drug use, and all of the problems that are associated with these encampments. And then you say, well, the after is a tiny home village where people are contained in an area. You're going to say, well, yes, is the after better than the before? Well, then all of the positive assessments were based on a before and after that does not apply here. It's a false equivalence. There is, in that direction up there to my right, I have spotted a single tent. There is a tent in this area. But in his blog, Patrick Johnstone says, oh, well, this is to address a problem of encampments that is already existing here. He's saying that, yeah, there's encampments there, so we're solving that problem. There are no encampments here. So the neighbors who live in the houses over there on River Drive are saying, well, what are you talking about? We're not suffering from some disorder and crime and a spree and this bonfire of problems that were associated with a homeless encampment. Why are you plunking this solution to an encampment here? It's like if your house is on fire, you call a fire department and they come and they put out the fire. You're very happy. It was a good result. The fire went out. But if the fire department comes to your house and starts spraying your house with hoses and damages your house, and you have massive water damage, and there was no fire, you're not going to be pleased. So that's the analogy here. There is no fire burning that needs to be put out with this, quote, homeless encampment action response plan. So it's wrong-headed from the very start. Now, it is true there are unhoused people across New Westminster. The homeless count last fall was in the neighborhood of 140 unhoused people. But they're spread out across the city. There's some downtown, uptown, other parts. If people ever go through New Westminster, It's kind of a long city stretched out along the river, and there's different neighborhoods and different places where people may be on houses. Maybe they're in underground parking lots. Maybe they're sleeping in bank machines. There are no encampments. So why are we having a solution to an encampment problem plunked down in the West? But I think it's because you have a very radical alignment between the new Westminster City Council and the NDP government in Victoria, because they're both controlled. The City Council of New Westminster is controlled by the NDP, and they just are in lockstep on almost everything. So when it comes to this concern of misinformation, it's one of the unfortunate realities is that there's this bitter feud going on in the town, and this is likely playing out across all of BC, Vancouver, Prince George. No matter where you go, there's a homeless problem, a drug overdose problem, a disorder problem. And the finger pointing is just outrageous. So the folks in the neighborhood here, and there's a petition with close to 2,000 names on it. They're saying, well, wait a minute, we're not, as Mayor Johnstone says, anti-housing. We are pushing back on safe supply and the harm reduction model of delivering housing. They would rather see recovery-oriented housing where drug use is not permitted on site. And this is a major criticism of the government. So to say that people who are opposing this project are anti-housing is misinformation. It's not really true. So I just like to bring people's attention to an article that we published in the New Westminster Times in February of last year. The title of the article is Bedlam, BC's Harm Reduction Gravy Train. So what this article does is just show how unequal the war for hearts and minds is in this province. It is really a story of how activist organizations have been funded to the tune of not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but tens of millions of dollars have flowed to organizations such as Coalition of Peers Dismantling the Drug War. This group was awarded $180,000 in taxpayer money in 2024. And it goes on and on and on. There was a group called, DULF, the Vancouver Drug Users Liberation Front Society. They got $120,000. Everyone knows that story. So what this story is about is the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, which was run by two MLAs from New Westminster, Judy Darcy and Jennifer Whiteside, poured tens of millions of dollars into an organization called the Community Action Initiative. And the Community Action Initiative turned around and gave the money to professional activist organizations such as DULF, such as this group, and then here's another one, Uniting Northern Drug Users, Undoing Stigma. They were awarded in 2024 $360,000. Here's another one. The East Kootenay Network of People Who Use Drugs. They were awarded $360,000. Now, the list goes on and on and on. You can read all about it in this report from 2024. It's right on the front page of our website, pinned to the homepage. This report took up almost the entirety of question period in Victoria when it came out. So You have, on the one hand, you have the government funding activism to push the idea of harm reduction and that we should destigmatize drug use, open public drug use. One group was looking to destigmatize drug dealing, saying that, oh, well, there are responsible drug dealers and irresponsible drug dealers. In other words, let's have a more friendly approach. And one of the groups is actively lobbying to erase the entire criminal code references to illegal drugs and to release anyone who's ever been convicted from prison. That's what the government, the BC NDP government has been doing. Now, the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions has disappeared. So, who are these activists? So, bringing it right back to New Westminster, there's a couple of people who have taken to social media to villainize people who would oppose this project. One of the people, his name is Trudy Goals. Trudy Goals is the longtime business partner of Nadine Nakagawa, who is a city councillor in New Westminster. So she says on her social media account, it's a certain level of evil inside someone to tell another human being that no, you can't have a safe place to live. So that's Trudy Goals. And there's someone else named Amina Yazin takes to social media and says, the people that are opposing this project are bigoted chaos agents known as the New Westminster Progressives. So there are two opposition councillors in the city council. She's calling them bigoted chaos agents. So who are these two people, Trudy Goals and Amina Yazin? Well, they just happen to be involved with the Simon Fraser Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue, and a specific project under that umbrella called Renovate the Public Hearing. Well, what is Renovate the Public Hearing? You can look it up. What it essentially is they want to eliminate public hearings. Why? Because they don't want the public to have a voice to express themselves in a way that's not under their control. In other words, they're worried that people will get up to a microphone in city council and say something that might be offensive to some oppressed, marginalized, equity-seeking person. So the concern is 100% towards individuals who may end up living here who they are trying to protect from stigma. So the reason we have a project landing here with no consultation, getting an enormous pushback by neighbors, pushback by rail, and all of that is ignored, is because of an ideology, a certain political stance and a political view that harm reduction, this idea that people should be destigmatized as users of drugs. Drug abuse is no longer a permitted expression. Drug addict is not permitted. They're not addicts, they're just users. How dare you stigmatize them as an addict? So that's what's happening here. They don't care what the residents think. They don't care what the rail stakeholders think. They're just plowing ahead with it. And this is a square peg in a round hole. This is not the right type of housing to address New Westminster's needs. So why does it come here? It's because it came from Victoria, where the NDP presides, and it's a very liberal, left-wing council, and they get on the horn to another very left-wing liberal NDP council and say, hey, I've got an idea. We don't need these containers anymore. Let's ship them over there. Oh, what a great idea. Meanwhile, as we've just learned, it hasn't even been worked out who's paying for it, who's liable for the potential death and injury. So that is the update, and it's really unfortunate because people do need housing. People do need to recover. We need more, there's voices calling for more recovery-oriented housing, more abstinence-based housing. And there's this, people who are saying that are just being smeared as literally evil. And it's not just anybody. These are people, and finally, I'll just share one example from Monday night's council meeting. There was a delegate who joined via video named Carter Deedman. So she had gone to university, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's a she or a he, but this person had gone to university in Ontario near Peterborough. This person told a story about living next to a homeless encampment and how horribly hellish it was and how out of control and how much crime and drug use and overdose and police and just a nightmare situation, and a tiny home village was developed, and how that greatly calmed the situation, and the before and after was like night and day. It was, she says, so quit all the disinformation. But it's just the same misinformation. It's that, well, you have a before, a hellscape of a tent encampment, and then you have this. But there's no before here. Where's the before? It's not here. So I did some digging about Carter Deedman, and sure enough, this is Carter Deedman holding a Peter Julian NDP sign, standing between Peter Julian and Jagmeet Singh. And her social media accounts just have the word activist on it. This is an activist associated with the NDP, getting up as a delegate to tout the virtues of this project in a very partisan way. Meanwhile, the folks who are concerned here, it's evident they've never set foot in City Hall before. This has been foisted upon them. This has been just thrown on them, and then if they speak up against it, they're smeared as, well, bigots and racists and anti-poor and all of the rest of it. So that's the message. In summary, the government is pouring tens of millions into activist organizations to develop public relations plans and messaging around a safe supply, harm reduction, and these types of housing. BC Housing doesn't even provide any high barrier housing. They're not in that business. Any money that they pour out is only within a certain type of parameters of low barrier, safe supply, harm reduction. And there are people who are just saying, no, we don't agree with that anymore. There's a group called Let's Vote Canada, and they've been going and protesting and pushing back. So the fact that this is emerging and kind of blowing up into a regional problem is to be expected. But the response from City Hall, in the position of the mayor, at least, in the media, is just simply to smear everyone else as spreading disinformation.
Spreading the same disinformation.
Well, I hope this has been helpful to share with you the context of what's really happening here and how it affects everyone across the province. And it's just based on the facts at hand. and what's really going on. So if you enjoy our reporting, you can go to our webpage and support us, newwesttimes.com. Up in the right-hand corner is the button that says support our work. If you would feel so inclined, we would really appreciate it. In the meantime, thanks for watching.